I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into a provocative new theory about Mars, polar anomalies, and the truth behind what NASA doesn't want you to see. It is all contained within a bold new book called Polar Light in Europe's Clouds. It's written by a terrific author. Her name is Ruth Leedy Carr. And in the book, she challenges long-held scientific assumptions, revealing what she believes is a cover-up surrounding the hollow planets of Mars and Earth. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. We ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her powerful book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. In your book, you say there is a massive cover-up about an imminent reversal of Earth's magnetic field, which you say will shift a polar hole in the north and in the south in the process of shifting the axis. The question is, how can you be sure of this? How can you be sure if it's a cover-up? And tell us a little bit about the far-reaching impacts.
I believe that the hole is going to wind up in Northern Europe, and that's based on initially it was based on the prophecies of Edgar Casey, which were really coming from another voice speaking through him. He was a medium, and but I did some research and I discovered that it appeared that Isaac Asimov and Carl Sagan were also supporting this idea, but of course not openly. But as to exactly where the poles will be, that's not the main point that I can prove anyway. I can't really prove where the new poles are going to be, but I can demonstrate that the Earth ought to be hollow, and particularly that Mars ought to be hollow, because we have the photographic evidence of Mars. Mm-hmm. The Mariner 7 photographs of August 4th, 1969, which appeared in several books, standard library books. Did you want me to describe exactly which books they were?
You don't need to. We can leave that for our readers to read in your book about your background on that. What is the timing for this event? Could it be hundreds of years away? Would it be happening within decades? What are your thoughts?
The reversing of Earth's magnetic field is the event that's going to kick off the axis shift, and that is predicted to occur as soon as immediately. But of course, that doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately. That just means that that's one of the windows of opportunity. There's an author, let's see, Garrett L. Verschure, in his book Cosmic Catastrophe, said in 1978, he said the reversal could begin in 50 to 150 years. So that begins in 2028, 3 years from now. And there was another, two authorities had an article in Scientific American in which they said, this was December 1989, Bloxham and Gubbins, they said that if a new hotspot emerges near Indonesia and begins traveling toward the tip of South America and Africa, if that happens, then the reversal could be precipitated immediately. But no one knows, of course, whether it will happen, next week or next month or next year. So it remains unknown. But if that does not happen, then you can assume the reversal will take perhaps 100 years, perhaps several hundred. I could, cite you different predictions from different authors just based on their estimates.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about what evidence you believe has been suppressed or altered by NASA.
Okay. My congressman sent a letter to NASA, sent a report of mine along with his own request that they comment. And I included a diagram of a photograph of Mars showing that the South Polar light, what I call the light cap, is on the night side. And that photograph is from Patrick Moore's Guide to Mars from August 4th, 1969. And so the diagram showed that the day-night border was at the right edge of the polar cap, and that the rest of the polar cap, all to the left of that point, was all on the night side. And this is determined based on the fact that when a planet goes through phases, only 180 degrees of the perimeter is visible at one time. You know that's true of the moon. A crescent moon has 180 degrees of the perimeter visible. Mm-hmm. Same is true of half phase or three-quarters phase. The amount of the perimeter always is 180 degrees. And the day-night border will curve one way or the other, but the perimeter will remain the same, the same number of degrees. And so when you have the bright spot on the side of the planet, you can measure 90 degrees in both directions from that bright spot, and that tells you where the day-night border is on the perimeter. And the polar cap is so close to the perimeter, there's just no question that it's on the night side. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I submitted this to my congressman, Blaine Gilchrist, who was a mathematician. And he submitted it to NASA, and NASA sent a letter, which I happen to have in front of me, said that they do not comment on speculative lay concepts, such as hollow earth theories, and which would have been all right if that's all they said. But then they went ahead and they did comment. In other words, all they were really saying is, we don't want to talk about the lighting of Mars. We want to talk about other evidence that we say demonstrates Mars is solid. And the other evidence was mass, moment of inertia, the weight of the Tharsis Mountains. And so, in other words, they were saying, we don't want to discuss your theory, except we will discuss it, but we don't want to discuss your evidence.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was playing fair.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's not playing fair because they basically switched it to their terms only. Talk to us, what are the implications if Earth is hollow?
What are the implications if the Earth is hollow?
Correct.
Well, the implications of a polar shift would be that the axis would be redefined by the solar wind. You see, the solar wind comes in, it's deflected by the magnetic field, which runs from the north magnetic pole to the south magnetic pole, and it shields the Earth from the cosmic radiation. And so all that solar wind is deflected towards the north and south magnetic poles. And that sets off the aurora, which forms a ring around the axis. And the fact that that impacts in a ring around the axis should tell us that the solar wind is actually defining the axis. And the reason that the solar wind is not actually hitting the axis as it defines the axis is, under the hollow earth theory, that there is no land at the axis. Nevertheless, you can define an axis by pushing in a circle around it, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. If you're spinning a record on a phonograph, you don't have to touch the axis. You can define the axis by, well, I shouldn't have said the phonograph. That's a bad example. You can define the axis of anything by spinning, by surrounding the axis with your fingers and spinning. In other words, you don't have to touch the axis in order to define the axis. Mm-hmm. So that's what's happening at the North Pole and the South Pole. The solar wind is coming in and hitting the rim of the polar opening and defining the axis in that way. So when the axis when the geomagnetic field reversal takes place, which could happen in the near future, the North Magnetic Pole will reform somewhere in the Southern Hemisphere. Mm-hmm. And the South Magnetic Pole will reform somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. According to the prophecies of Casey, that will take place in Northern Europe. But I'm not prepared to try to prove that. There's just no way I can prove where the new South Magnetic Pole will be. Mm-hmm. But the main point is that it's not going to be exactly where the North Pole is today, if you know what I mean. It's a reversal, but it's not. It's a reversal, but it's not exactly corresponding to the exact locations of the poles today.
Yeah. Now, would this result in the end of the world as we know it?
Well, what will happen is that when let's say that the new South Magnetic Pole winds up in Northern Europe, the solar wind will be directed to that new magnetic pole. And the same in the Southern Pacific Ocean, the new North Pole, the solar wind will be directed by the magnetic field to that new North Magnetic Pole. And so that will create a new axis and at those 2 points. And the spinning of the planet will cause the holes to be reshaped. Mm-hmm. Because the holes at the poles are what you call rotational effects. Mm-hmm. The hollow Earth is based on the same structure as the planetary nebula, which is a shell that rotates around a star. I've heard the shell referred to as a torus. Anyway, the hole has to be located at the axis. Mm-hmm. because orbiting matter can't remain stationary at the axis. So the hole has to surround the axis. Well, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if you change the location of the axis, the hole has to change with it. You see, it's not an instantaneous change anyway. As the axis moves inches along from the old location to the new location, the rims, the dirt will be gradually spun away from one rim and deposited on the other rim in a gradual way, so that the hole moves in a gradual way. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It's an amazing theory, and there's a lot more to the theory and other theories that Ruth espouses in her wonderful book. It's called Polar Hole Light in Europe's Clouds. It challenges long-held scientific assumptions, revealing what the author believes is a cover-up surrounding the hollow planets of Mars and Earth, and is backed up by 43 years of research as well. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.